She's like a sickness in my brain, a vision standing by the window pane. She ripples through the blinds and leaves me in a daze. It's in the way her body moves me, the way she grabs me and intoxicates, until the signals in my mind forget to operate. Fragile skull. I take my pleasure from my alcohol. She'll never give you any time at all. She just comes and goes, you know, and she's got me living in a chemical.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another Coffee and Crime Time, and today we are continuing to talk about the Lori Vallow, Chad De Bell ongoing saga. We couldn't get to it all in the first video, which kind of gives you an indication of how crazy this case is, how it's ever evolving, and how it doesn't seem to be letting up anytime soon. Today we're going to finish going over the Dateline special as well as weaving in other bits of information that have come out since we've last had videos on this case. And we're also going to go over the interviews that Melanie and her new husband Ian have given recently. We're also going to touch on the interview that Lori De Bell's mother and sister have recently given. And there's a lot to cover, a lot to take in. But before we get started, I do want to have a word from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Surfshark is a modern VPN service designed with the user in mind. Their utilities are powered by robust security mechanisms, but designed to be simple and intuitive to use, which is important for someone like me who is incredibly technologically challenged. Enjoy all the freedoms of an open internet safely and anonymously with no device limits. During quarantine, we may be running out of things to watch. We may have binged everything on Netflix and Hulu, Amazon Prime. We've caught up on all our favorite TV shows, and given the way things are going, I'm not sure any new TV shows or movies will be out anytime soon, considering they aren't really allowed to be in production at this time. You can use Surfshark VPN to access television shows, movies, and content that's not available in your area. I'm a huge Peaky Blinders fan, and when a new season comes out, I can't wait for it to hit Netflix. Literally, I can't wait. I need to watch it immediately. And I have in the past used sketchy VPN services to access TV shows or college basketball games that were blacked out in my area, so it's really comforting to use Surfshark, a VPN that utilizes industry-leading encryption. And Surfshark will never track, monitor, or store what you do online. It's the one time you will be able to move freely knowing no one is keeping track of your internet usage for their own motives, like targeting marketing ads towards you. Also, in my research for these cases we cover, I have an interest in using a VPN. Not only can I use camouflage mode, which allows me to keep all my internet usage and history private from even my internet provider, but there is a no borders mode, which allows me to search the web in restricted areas so I can dig really deep for all the dirt and details. I've often thought of how bad it would look if something happened to someone in my life, let's say my husband or something, and then the police come and they look at my internet usage and they see all of these incredibly suspicious internet history searches. Just a couple videos ago, we did the Nancy Brophy, the wrong husband, and there was a lot of me Googling how to murder your husband. And obviously, that's not for my own usage, it's for the case I'm covering, but that would be a hard thing to explain to police during an investigation if something happened to my husband. So now I use Surfshark VPN whenever I'm doing any research for my cases. That way there's no incredibly incriminating internet trail behind me. If you're interested in joining me and having an open, safe, and private internet experience, click the link in the description box. Surfshark is giving viewers of this channel 85% off a 2-year plan and 3 extra months for free. All you have to do is click the link and use code stephanieharlowe to take advantage of this offer and start protecting yourself today on an unlimited number of devices. You can protect all your internet devices, including your phone, your computer, your tablet, your laptop, as well as all your family family's internet devices. So your kids' iPads, your husband's phone, your husband's computer. It's pretty awesome, actually. I've never seen a VPN offer this kind of unlimited package or this unlimited amount of devices available to you if you buy their VPN. So it was definitely an impressive thing to me and something that caused Surfshark to stand out amongst all the other VPN services. Thank you so much for listening to the sponsor. As you know, sponsors often keep this channel going because we do get demonetized because we talk about some crazy stuff. And thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Now let's talk about Lori and Chad and Thomas Vallow, Melanie and Ian Pulowski, and Alex Cox, all of these people who have become like almost characters in a crazy TV show. Just as a heads up, the interview portion with Melanie and Ian might be so long because I have a lot to say about it. I might do it in a separate video. I'm just going to see how this one goes. But if I do it in a separate video, I'll record that video right after this so that it'll just be up the next day. So if I post this, I'll post the other one the day after so you guys don't have to wait. When we last left off, Lori Vallow had just told her adult son, Colby, that she and his sister Tylee and his brother JJ were moving, but she couldn't tell him where. Lori ended up taking the kids to Rexburg, Idaho, where her idol and guru Chad De Bell lived with his then alive and well wife Tammy De Bell. She got there in August of 2019, but she wasn't alone. Eventually, both her niece Melanie and her brother Alex Cox joined her, living in the same townhouse complex. Let's talk about Melanie for a moment so we can place her in the story. Melanie is the daughter of Lori's sister, Stacy Lynn Cox-Cope, who sadly passed away in 1998 at the age of 31. Melanie was 6 when she seems to have been unjustly taken away from her mother, and she recently wrote on Facebook that afterwards she was told all manner of lies about her mom, saying, quote, "I stand here today grateful knowing that no one and no lie can take me away from the bond of my mother who is laid to rest since I was 9. Because of being motherless from a very young age, Melanie became very close to her aunt Lori, who she claims used to carry her around pretending to be her mother. Melanie was married to a man named Brandon Boudreaux, and they were a cute couple, if I do say so myself. Really cute, all American. You know, there's pictures of them going on marathons together, and just, they look happy. They looked happy. Like Lori and Charles, they seemed to have a perfectly happy and normal marriage, raising their 4 kids together, but then suddenly, Melanie began spending a lot of time with her aunt and the group before suddenly demanding a divorce in June, which was a complete shock to Brandon since he claims they had no prior issues. In court documents connected with divorce proceedings, Brandon alleged that his wife was mixed up in a cult. Then, things started to move very quickly. On October 1st, Lori Vallow rented a storage unit in Rexburg where she would be seen on surveillance along with Chad De Bell and her brother Alex Cox, bringing things in and out, mainly the belongings of JJ and Tylee, who had not been seen since mid-September. Tylee was last seen September 8th when she went to Yellowstone National Park with Lori, JJ, and her uncle Alex. And JJ was last seen at the end of September after Lori withdrew him from his new school, claiming she would be homeschooling him from then on. Colby, back in Arizona, kept trying to reach Tylee after she moved, but he says she would never answer her phone, and when he called Lori to see if Tylee was okay, Lori said, yeah, she's fine, she's just very busy. On October 2nd, Brandon Boudreaux was shot at while leaving the gym, and he believes the shooter was Alex Cox. Now, we've talked about all of this in past videos, but he believes the shooter was Alex Cox because the vehicle that the shooter was driving was a Jeep registered to Charles Vallow that was known to be Tylee's main vehicle she used. And on that day, both Lori and Chad were in Rexburg. Now, something else Lori and Chad brought into that storage unit was a tire, a big tire, like the one that goes on the back of a Jeep, like the one you might remove if you wanted to pull up that back window so you could aim a gun out of it, and also the back seat of a vehicle. So we do suspect, and we kind of have put together that wheel or tire in that back seat came from the Jeep that Alex used when he was trying to take Brandon Boudreaux out. That's just the speculation and the theory. This same day, October 2nd, Lori Vallow used her late husband Charles Vallow's Amazon account to purchase a size 4 sterling silver Southwestern style malachite ring for $35.99, which she had shipped to her home in Rexburg. Now, this was 17 days before Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy, would die mysteriously in her sleep. According to Brandon Boudreaux, immediately after he was shot at, his wife, Melanie, left Arizona and moved to Rexburg with Lori, where she met another man on a dating site in November and married him 2 weeks later. This man was Ian Pulowski, and both Ian and Melanie make appearances in this Dateline special, and we're going to talk more about them in a moment. On October 9th, Tammy De Bell called the police and reported that a masked man had pointed a gun at her while she was unloading groceries from her car. She claimed that this masked man pulled the trigger, but nothing happened, so she thought it was just a BB gun. The police dismissed it as a sick prank, but then 10 days later, Tammy De Bell was dead. A healthy, fairly young woman training for a 5K with no previous medical conditions had just passed away in her sleep, and her husband refused an autopsy. Now, after all the pieces started falling in place, police had Tammy's body exhumed for an autopsy, suspecting that foul play may have been involved, and the results of that autopsy have not been released yet, even though there are some individuals who would really like to get their hands on it, mainly Lori Vallow's attorney. The attorney has requested toxicology and autopsy reports for both Charles Vallow and Joseph Ryan, as well as toxicology and autopsy reports for Tammy De Bell, a move which the Deputy Attorney General has called a fishing expedition, considering Lori isn't being charged with the deaths of any of these people at this time, and she's only being held in prison for not giving authorities the location of her missing children. Therefore, they don't feel that this information is relevant to the case at hand. So if Lori was on trial for the murder of Charles Vallow, or the murder of Joe Ryan, or the murder of Tammy De Bell, then absolutely, yes, Lori's lawyer could request these documents and would be within their rights to receive them. But that's not what Lori's in court for. Lori's in court for, child neglect and child abandonment, whatever. She's in court, essentially, when it boils down, for not telling the police where her kids are. So it seems that Lori's lawyer would like these documents because, in my opinion, he'd like to get ahead of the game. There has to be a part of this lawyer, as a man educated in the legal system, a little part of him that knows Lori and or Chad had something to do with these suspicious deaths. And he might have an interest in being apprised of where the police investigation is at this point and what they have against his client or his client's husband. However, since Lori hasn't been charged with anything in relation to these deaths and they are still part of an ongoing investigation, it's highly unlikely his request will be approved. But I wrote on Twitter that I do feel we're going to have access to Tammy De Bell's autopsy sooner than later, because they are investigating the deaths of Charles Vallow, Joe Ryan, even Alex Cox, even after his autopsy came back natural causes. So they are still investigating these things. And I do have a feeling that they will put either Chad or Lori on trial for the murder of one or more of these people. And at that point, we will see Tammy De Bell's autopsy results. But I'm not sure it's going to make a difference. It was 2 months between when Tammy died and when she was buried and exhumed for autopsy. And according to forensic pathologist Cyril Wecht, they are going to have a hard time finding anything concrete. Now, Cyril has consulted on a large number of high-profile cases, including the assassination of JFK and his brother, Robert, John Benet Ramsey, to name a few, and he's considered to be an authority on these matters. And his presence here shows this case is going to be one of the big ones. His main question was to ask why the autopsy on Tammy De Bell wasn't performed after she died, which I think is a question we've all had. Sure, the family requested to not have it done. And when we say the family, we mean Chad De Bell, her husband. But when a person dies under suspicious circumstances, what the family wants, especially when it's the husband of this person or the wife of this person, and as we know, it's very likely that somebody is going to be killed by somebody they know. It's more likely you'll be murdered by someone you know than a stranger. So if it's the husband asking for this autopsy not to be done, and she's really fairly young, healthy, has no issues, why wouldn't it have been done? And that's a big question, and it has been a question since the beginning. Now, Cyril talked to Court TV, and he said the following.
As I understand it, Tammy De Bell did not have any particularly serious illness. I do not understand how this body was not subjected to an autopsy. It is not up to the family to say they want it or they don't want it. This is a case in which the coroner definitely should have done an autopsy. It is deplorable that still in the United States of America, there are many jurisdictions in which coroners will finesse cases like this. Incredible. So that is regrettable, because certain things have been lost and cannot be retrieved. And it is not a matter of funding, and it is not a matter of whether you're too busy or not. This case should have been autopsied, because you have no way of knowing what caused her death. Maybe they did draw blood, and if they found no drugs, all the more reason why it was necessary to do an autopsy. There are ways in which a person can be murdered and show no external evidence of that kind of murder. I won't go into the details, but believe me, it can be done, and it is not at all rare. So the failure to do a postmortem examination at that time was simply, as far as I'm concerned, governmental, professional negligence.
So after exhumation, there's going to be no bodily fluids that can be drawn or tested. So if Tammy had been drugged, it's not likely they will be able to prove it. According to Cyril Wecht, if he had been in charge of this autopsy, he would have done several things. He would have checked the bile in the gallbladder, checked for spinal fluid, taken tissue samples for toxicological examination, specifically from the brain and liver. He would have checked the stomach and intestinal tract and studied tissues microscopically to see if there was any evidence of a natural disease progression, such as pneumonia or an infection of the kidneys, liver, or pancreas. He would have removed the body hair and fingernails, since certain poisons and heavy metals can be given to a person over a period of time, and they can be found accumulated in the hair and nails. At this point, Cyril believes that the autopsy will come back undetermined. Cyril says he also would have checked for the presence of ethylene glycol, a chemical found in antifreeze which has been used in murders before, and it's very hard to detect in the body. A Texas oncologist was charged in 2013 for trying to kill her husband by putting the chemical in his coffee. Dahlia DiPolito tried to put it in her husband Mike's chai latte. We've seen this happen on many occasions, and there's a reason why. Ethylene glycol is syrupy, odorless, and sweet tasting, and it can easily be mixed into drinks such as coffee, tea, soda, or juice without the recipient of that drink really noticing. Now they may notice that the taste is a little off, but it won't be evident to them, if it's done correctly, that they're being poisoned. And I think what Dahlia did was she just tried to kind of fill Mike's whole cup with this antifreeze, or at least half of it, and then put the chai latte in on top of it. So that's going to taste significantly off. The toxin primarily affects the nervous system and the kidneys, and it doesn't take much, just a third of a cup, to be lethal. And if someone dies after consuming this chemical, it can very much look like a natural death. In the Dateline special, Melanie is asked if she believes that Alex tried to shoot her ex-husband, and she says that she asked Alex, and he made jokes about it, and the conversation ended with them laughing about how ludicrous it was. Melanie also stated that by the time she arrived in Rexburg, the kids were already gone, and she had no idea where they were. After Tammy died, Melanie claims she saw a Facebook post on Chad's account announcing the passing of his wife, and she felt sad for him because she knew how much he had loved his wife. However, it didn't seem odd to her when just 2 weeks after Tammy had been buried, Chad and Lori were getting married on a beach in Kauai, and on Lori's finger, the same ring that she purchased on Amazon 17 days before Tammy died can be prominently seen. Now, if somebody was into spirituality and believed that some stones, some minerals have healing properties, malachite can be very symbolic. It's thought to be a stone of balance, abundance, manifestation, and intention, often called the stone of transformation. It absorbs energy and draws emotions to the surface, being used for deep energy healing, bringing a healing and positive transformation to the wearer. It can also be used over the third eye to facilitate psychic vision. Malachite amplifies energies of all kind, positive and negative. It can help the user acknowledge, draw out, and discharge negative energy, including old emotional patterns, past traumas, and suppressed feelings. Everything about Lori's move to Rexburg, her marriage to Chad De Bell, the disappearance of her children, suggests a desire for her to start fresh without the weight and baggage of her old emotional patterns, past traumas, and suppressed feelings. Maybe even those of her past mistakes, her past indiscretions. Maybe Lori's hands were dirty. Joe Ryan with a dark spirit, dead. Tylee Ryan, her daughter with Joe Ryan, a dark spirit, missing. Charles Vallow, ex-husband, taken over by a demon zombie, dead. And the child she shared with him, JJ, light-spirited or not, also missing. All the things that reminded her of her past marriages, the many lives she'd lived before, gone, as if they never existed. Now, she could be Lori De Bell, wife of respected author and prophet Chad De Bell. She could do important godly work with him. Maybe he told her that these ties from her past needed to be released before she could go on to do this work. And she was desperate enough for a reset, a new chapter, with a person who thought she was sent from heaven, that she did what it took to release them. Plus, Chad De Bell had received almost $500,000 from his dead wife's life insurance, so it didn't hurt that he was technically rolling in the dough at that moment. No one attended the wedding. They didn't tell anyone they were getting married. They were alone on a beach in Lori's happy place, Kauai. Melanie Pulowski says she can't really explain why the wedding happened so quickly, besides to say that sometimes in their faith, these things move fast. She would know, considering she married a man she'd known for only 2 weeks in a Vegas wedding during a November weekend. That same weekend, Lori's brother Alex Cox was also getting married in Vegas to a woman named Zulema Pastines. Lori had met Zulema in 2018 when she was a follower of Chad's, and Zulema has called herself a touch and cuddling expert. So I think what she technically did was some sort of physical or emotional therapy using human touch, which I get completely, because human touch, I think, is the most powerful kind of cure for loneliness or isolation or even anxiety, skin-to-skin contact. That's why they tell you after you have a baby, take the baby and put this child immediately on your skin, and it will calm this baby, and it will make his transition into the world from a soft, warm place into this cold, loud place a lot easier. So I get that. But according to Lori, Zulema was not only a cuddle and touch expert, she could control the elements, and Lori was very impressed by this. Okay, so let's break this down. Melanie and Brandon's divorce is finalized in November. Melanie meets Ian through an LDS dating app in November. On November 26th, Kay Woodcock calls the police and requests a welfare check on her grandson JJ, who she hasn't heard from, and the police go to Lori's townhouse where they find Chad and Alex and question them on the whereabouts of JJ. Alex tells the police JJ is with his grandparents in Louisiana, which the police know isn't true because that's who called them and sent them there. On November 27th, they come back with a search warrant, but Chad and Lori are gone, which Melanie doesn't think is strange because their trip had been planned already. Lori and Chad rent a condo in Kauai after Chad set the reservation up through email, describing himself and Lori as a clean couple with no pets or children. On September 29th, Alex marries Zulema, and the next day, Melanie and Ian get married. And Alex and Zulema are a witness to Melanie and Ian's marriage. And 3 days before, Lori, Chad, and Alex all ran from Idaho as the police were making welfare checks and trying to figure out where JJ and Tylee were. After the wedding, Alex Cox took his wife's last name and they moved back to Arizona. And Melanie claims none of this was planned or orchestrated. Everyone was just doing their own thing. Come on. Is it possible, especially in Alex's case, that this marriage was constructed to prevent Zulema from testifying against him in a court of law? Which leads to the next inevitable question, how much do Zulema and Ian know? And then 2 weeks later, Alex Cox is dead. The day he was found dead in Zulema's home, Zulema claims Lori called her and told her that she needed to check on Alex because Lori was worried about her brother. Zulema called the house and talked to her son, who was there with Alex, and who told her that Alex was not doing well. She told her son to call 911, but it was too late. Alex Cox, at the age of 51, apparently healthy, was dead. Now, there are these two lawyers who talked to Dateline for the special. I really wish that I could play you this clip, but I know Dateline doesn't mess around with copyright. But if you want to go watch it, or you have watched it and you just want to go back to that spot, you have to see this for yourself. It's so funny. So these two lawyers, I believe they are Zulema's lawyers and maybe Melanie and Ian's lawyers as well. And I thought there was a very odd exchange between the two of them while they were discussing all of these strange occurrences. Now, they're sitting there next to each other, and the one on the right, my right, says with a smirk, "I've heard it in the news. He takes a shot at Brandon, he shot Charles, and now we have to get rid of him. And so now he's dead." And sure, that's the logical way you could go with that, but there's no evidence to support that. And he's talking about Alex Cox. Now, the other lawyer kind of looks over at the first lawyer and corrects him, saying that's the theoretical way to go about it, while side-eyeing his buddy like, "We're going to have to talk about this later. You can't talk on TV if you're going to say stupid things." And the whole point of this is, Melanie, Ian, these lawyers, they all seem to be making light of these strange circumstances. And this remains true throughout Ian and Melanie's interviews, throughout the interview with Lori's mother and sister, Summer. It just seems like everybody's laughing it off. Melanie says that she asked Alex if he, had taken a shot at her ex-husband, and Alex laughed about it, and then they made jokes about how ludicrous that would be. We have 2 kids missing. This is not something to laugh off. It's not something to judge the community, people as a whole, the general public, for speculating that something crazy is going on here because the circumstances are so bananas. But all of these people want to make you feel like you're overreacting and you're taking things out of context and you're blowing things out of proportion. And that, my friends, is the definition of gaslighting. Okay, so Alex Cox's autopsy results have finally been released, and apparently he died of natural causes, more specifically a pulmonary blood clot in his lung. Family attorney Robert P. Jarvis made a statement saying Alex's widow, along with his mother and sister, Summer, not Lori, and niece Melanie, are pleased to see the report confirms what they knew and maintained since Alex's death on December 12, 2019. In interviews with many news agencies, the family stated numerous times what they knew to be true. Alex's death had no sinister aspect. With a degree of vindication, the family hopes that the confirmation of this truth will help all to step back, take a breath, and allow the truth to unfold through the process. I mean, I would give Ian and Melanie and all these people who are feeling satisfaction from these autopsy results the same advice. I would advise you to take a step back and breathe before you feel a degree of vindication, because there's nothing involved in this case that doesn't have a sinister aspect. And Alex dying suddenly after all of this, it is a very much so a coincidence. And I don't believe in coincidences. Alex died the day after Tammy De Bell's body was exhumed. And what process are we supposed to be waiting for the truth to unfold through while we take breaths and do yoga headstands and 2 kids are missing? Whose process? The police? Lori's? Chad's? The 144,000? What process is it when 2 kids are missing and have been for the better part of a year? The timing is just too convenient, guys. The day after Tammy De Bell was exhumed, and the police are talking about, investigating how she died, he suddenly passes away. And maybe Alex did have a condition, but maybe when he found out that Tammy was going to be finally getting an autopsy, he stressed himself out so much it aggravated his condition. From this 2008 article I read on Science Daily, I found that stress and anxiety are linked to a higher coagulation system. The coagulation system involves 2 separate mechanisms: coagulation, which thickens the blood in order to form a plug and avoid excessive bleeding from damaged vessels. Then there is fibrinolysis, which keeps the blood fluid and breaks down clots. In the case of patients with high levels of anxiety, researchers found the coagulation was activated, but the fibrinolysis was inhibited. Blood clotting is a very complicated and intricate process. You don't want your blood to be too thin, because then if you get cut, you're just going to bleed out. And you don't want your blood to be too thick, because that causes blood clots, which are very dangerous. So what this article and this study basically say are somebody with high levels of anxiety and stress are going to have more of the coagulation, which is the thickening of the blood, and less of the fibrinolysis, which is the thinning of the blood. So there is that, and the fact that the police in Gilbert, Arizona are still investigating his death even after it came back natural causes. Let's move to Melanie and Ian. Now, Melanie has been saying since the beginning, they're not a cult, they're normal people, and she doesn't know where JJ and Tylee are. After Ian and Melanie got married, Ian's ex-wife expressed her concern about the children she shared with her ex-husband being around Melanie, and by default, Lori and Chad. His ex-wife is named Natalie, and Natalie said she's going to go to the police, and she convinced Ian to go with her. Now, when they got to the Rexburg police station, Ian met with law enforcement officers, including those from the FBI, who had already been looking into this case. According to Ian, they asked him to help find the kids and to see if Melanie knew anything about their whereabouts, so for the next 2 weeks he wore a wire, secretly recording his new bride. According to Ian, these recorded conversations captured nothing of interest. Now, are we really supposed to believe that Ian didn't tell Melanie he was wearing a wire for 2 weeks? He claimed he eventually did tell her, even though the police and the FBI obviously wouldn't have wanted that, and she was understanding and forgave him. And I'm sorry, but I just find both of these things incredibly hard to believe. I find it hard to believe that a man would wear a wire and record the woman he just married and not tell her. I find it hard to believe that a woman would find out that her new husband had been wearing a wire and recording her secretly to give information to the police and the FBI right after they got married. And she'd be so forgiving about it. That's a betrayal of trust. I mean, I'm not defending Melanie. And, I'm definitely not saying Ian's actions were wrong, but if it was me, to me, that would be a huge betrayal of trust. And even though you may have done the right thing, you didn't do the right thing for our marriage, which technically should be the most important thing to you. But she forgave him. He lied to her. He recorded her. And then she forgave him, and all is well. And then Ian says in this Dateline special, this isn't all the hype it's been made out to be. But as with so much else in this case, that isn't the whole truth, because Ian was singing a completely different tune before. Ian's ex-wife Natalie recovered some documents on his computer, a journal of sorts that he'd made while working as a double agent and spying on his wife, and I have the whole document here. It starts off talking about the belief system that Chad and Lori held. Item 1 is titled Multiple Probations and says a person will need a minimum of 9 mortal lives to become exalted, but more to become gods. Now, obviously, I'm not an expert on the LDS Church. I'm not Mormon. And I really don't know personally a lot of Mormons, but I have done my research throughout this case, and from what I can tell, in the LDS religion, exaltation is a belief among members that mankind can reach the highest levels of salvation, to eternally live in God's presence, become gods themselves, and then live forever with their families. Okay, so what does probation mean? We know what probation means, in earthly terms. And it kind of means the same thing. The word probation comes from the Latin word probare, which means to test. When a person is on probation, they are given privileges for a period of time and observed to see if they can be trusted with these privileges on a more permanent basis. So for Mormons, it looks like probation basically means your life on earth. And through being reborn and multiple lives, you would have the possibility of coming back on a higher level. So for Mormons, the probation period is more than a time of a test. It's a time of preparing. So this document goes on to say, after 2 mortal lives, you can choose to sign a light contract or a dark contract, but your choice doesn't have to be permanent. You can also choose to not be reborn at all if you're satisfied with your progress. Your veil will grow thinner each time you're reborn. Multiple sealings are possible, but males can choose one true spouse or have many. So what I believe is happening in this document, the belief system that Ian has written down, that he's gathered from Lori and Chad and Melanie, it seems to be a mix of traditional LDS beliefs and then just whatever else is going on. Okay, so item 2 is titled Translation. Translated beings cannot die. They cannot reproduce, they do not need sleep or food, and do not feel the sorrow of the world. However, injury is possible, but healing is accelerated and it's never fatal. Translation will be done in multiple phases/tests, usually lasting 3 days. Upon completing the last phase, the Lord appears to the newly translated being. So it looks like these phases or tests can come in the form of physical and emotional phases and tests. The physical test can be any ailment, from sexual desire to disease to severe fatigue. The emotional test can be any emotional or mental ailment, including a great test of faith or a time of darkness and doubt. Ian writes that it is possible a new phase will be discovered as husband and wife become more united sexually, possibly increasing power and vibration. Ian goes on to write that there are 50 translated human beings, and detectives Hope and Hermosa have been identified as these dark translated beings. They work under the direction of Satan, Lucifer, and Cain. Skipping ahead to item 4, titled Zombies. So it says item 4, zombies, and then there's A, B, C, D, and E. A says that zombies are human bodies that have had their original spirits forced from them and have been possessed by either a demon, original third of the heavenly host who followed Lucifer, a disembodied spirit, a once living human spirit who have chosen to not return in another probation, or a worm slug creature controlled by Lucifer that enters the body to control the host. B says spirits can be pushed from their bodies during traumatic events or deadly injury. And then C says spirits pushed out are trapped in limbo as the body they're tied to is still living but cannot be occupied by them anymore. Moving on to D, spirits trapped in limbo cannot progress to a new mortal life and cannot re-enter their existing body. The only way to move forward is to await the death of their current possessed body. Okay, so as we know, and we've talked about this in other videos, it was rumored that Lori and Chad believed that all these people around them were zombies, right? Brandon Boudreaux, Melanie's ex-husband, was a zombie. Charles Vallow, a zombie or taken over by an evil spirit, Nick Schneider. And then the kids, too. The kids had been taken over by zombies. So technically, if you were a follower of this religion and you believed these things, ending the lives of these people is actually keeping them safe and protecting them. It's actually allowing them to get out of limbo and possibly be reborn in another probation. Moving on to item 5, teleportation, which is something that allegedly Lori Vallow can do. When translated beings are needed, they may, with the Lord's permission, teleport to the necessary location to perform their assigned duties. Now we have item 6, dark and light portals. Physical objects all around us have ties to the spiritual world and can open portals/gateways of both light and darkness through which light and dark entities may pass. Okay, so item 7 basically talks about the Church of the Firstborn and the 144,000. And I do believe the 144,000 is a common belief in the LDS religion, but this Church of the Firstborn looks like it's something created by Chad and Lori. So it says the Church of the Firstborn is a higher organization and God's church in its truest form on earth. It also says that the mysteries of God are revealed to those who have become a part of the Church of the Firstborn, and terrestrial blessings and locations begin to be revealed to its members. Doctrines add to but do not replace those of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Prophets of the Mormon Church presides over the general congregation, while others are called specifically to run the Church of the Firstborn. And they have multiple branches throughout the world. So I do believe that Chad was excommunicated from the LDS Church. So in my opinion, this is somebody who really was upset by his excommunication. And he's like, I'm just going to create my own religion, and it's going to be based on the LDS religion. But then I'll just tell people that the reason I'm not leading like a legitimate LDS congregation is because we all have different callings, and some are called to lead regular LDS churches, and I've been called to lead the Church of the Firstborn. The 144,000 are called to bring past all signs of the second coming of Christ. Multiple groups specializing in different powers and activities, and apparently Chad and Lori's group specializes in healing and music. Now, the next item, item 8, says dark church and priesthood. And this says Satan is God's exact opposite. Lucifer has a body, was once an apostle, and fell. Cain was the first dark being to be translated in this creation and walks the earth with 50 dark translated beings to delay the Lord's second coming. Item 9 says spiritual gifts powers. People can manipulate the elements to do the Lord's will and bring to pass signs of his second coming. Item 10 says, if you can imagine it, it's real. And this is very interesting to me. It says every fantastic idea is a reality somewhere. Magic, wizards, sorcerers, witches, etc. Spells and curses in Harry Potter are real and require great focused will to use. That's what it says. And then it goes on to say supernatural creatures are also real. Dragons, giants, fairies, centaurs, etc. I mean, I don't know what to feel about this because one part of me is like, yeah, that would be so cool. I mean, who hasn't wanted to get their letter telling them they're going to go to Hogwarts and they're going to become a wizard? We all want that. We all want that. I mean, when I was reading the Harry Potter books, I'd like leave my window open so that my owl could come in and drop the letter off. I was like 15 years old. But I still wanted to hold on to that feeling of magic. It's the reason that we as adults still like Disney movies, because they recapture that magic from our childhood and they make us feel young again. However, to come right out and say spells and curses in Harry Potter are real, but they require great focused will to use. And as much as I want to live in a world where we can teleport and cast magic spells and we're wizards and there's fairies and centaurs, it would be awesome. I mean, it's just not really that realistic, right? And this is something that you see a lot of the times in children especially. We see these characters in all of our favorite books and movies from our childhood. And these characters are, pushed aside and they're undermined and they're not taken seriously. But then come to find they are like the most powerful person in the world. Harry Potter's the perfect example. His parents die. He ends up living with his aunt and uncle, the Dursleys. They treat him like garbage and they spoil his cousin Dudley, right? He has to live in this little hole under the stairs and barely has enough food and has no toys and has to wear all of Dudley's hand-me-downs. And Dudley's over here just getting 75 gifts on his birthday and he's getting a PS4 and an Xbox. And Harry has nothing and he's treated like garbage. But then come to find out, Harry is actually the most powerful wizard in the whole world, and he is the only one who can defeat Voldemort. This is a common fantasy for us regular folk, because often in life we feel overlooked. We feel pushed to the side. We feel like we go to work 8 hours a day and we do our best and our boss doesn't appreciate us and our family doesn't appreciate us and nobody thinks we have potential for anything, and we get, down on ourselves. So we like reading stories like this where the underdog comes up and, takes over. And he's actually the best person in the whole world and nobody knew, and what a surprise. And then you look at somebody like Chad De Bell. And then you look at somebody like Lori Vallow, two people who would probably feel very similar. Unappreciated, Lori by her husbands or the people in her life, Chad by the LDS Church. Next, we go to item 11, and it's labeled spiritual weapons. Item A says dark and light weapons, and then underneath that it says weapons that cannot be perceived by celestial beings that injure and scar the spirit. Item B says cords, and then under that it says ties to people and things both light and dark that influence us, and then item C says spiritual healing, and here we see healing malachite solution / balm. Malachite is said to have healing properties administered by calling on it in a blessing. Now I want to read you a little bit of what Ian wrote in this document after he lists all these beliefs. He said, "When Melanie began sharing all of these things with me, I tried to keep an open mind. I'd only met her 4 days previous, but felt very comfortable around her. I believe there is more in the gospel than what I have seen so far, but I never thought it would sound like this. The ideas seemed harmless at first, and she sounded pretty certain of some of them. She talked about how she'd learned some of these things in the temple and others from Chad and Lori. Upon first meeting Chad and Lori, I didn't get a bad impression of them, but they did seem different. I didn't think anything of that, as I feel that's a fairly normal feeling to experience. I didn't give them much thought, as they said they were planning on taking off and that I'd be taking the reins concerning care of Melanie. They said they'd be going to Hawaii and invited me to come visit sometime. Later, Melanie explained porting and that they could travel there by that method. The first time hearing all of these new beliefs was a jolt. I was looking for someone spiritual, but this was a leap beyond that into concerning territory. I had fears and doubts, but I trusted Melanie and wanted to give it a fair chance, so I continued to listen and ask questions in hopes it would click for me. It never did. There were fun and exciting ideas, but it felt like many of them were ripped straight out of a Dungeons and Dragons manual. Between the stats, accounts of dark and light weapons, and words spoken in blessings, it sounded like someone had created a tabletop RPG based on the Bible. While living something like that appealed to me, I couldn't find anything to confirm it as I prayed and asked. I figure anyone called to something like this would struggle, but how else would they be made aware of things like this? I continue to try to keep an open mind and proceed with caution." Melanie began to share that she feared for the lives of 2 of her children based on a dream she'd had where they came to her. They brought her tidings of great joy. Her daughter thanked her for allowing her the freedom to use her agency until the end. This concerned me and made my heart ache for her. I feel there is no way anything could have happened without people finding out. We married faster than any sane couple would, but we both felt it was right. On our wedding night, she began to elaborate on the ideas she's shared earlier about her children coming to her. She explained zombies and her fears about what Chad and Lori stated concerning the original spirits being caught in limbo until the body's death. She stated that Brandon had been possessed by a demon or another dark entity sometime after June of this year. She was told either through revelation or by Chad that something would happen to him, that something needed to happen to him in order for his spirit to progress and for the Lord's plan to continue. She didn't take well to the idea of her husband dying as part of the Lord's plan, but didn't think action would be taken by anyone. She still loves Brandon and would never wish any ill on him. It just sounded to her like it would be something that happened on its own when it was his time. This is where things started becoming concerning to me. Just now, Ian, this is when it's concerning. She shared the idea that Chad and Lori could have directed Alex Cox, to take a shot at Brandon. It wasn't anything she was sure about. The concern began when she was called into the Gilbert Police Department and asked about Chad, Lori, and Alex after the attempt on Brandon's life. She later was given the impression that the bullet needed to move 5 inches so as not to hit Brandon. Initially, to me, it sounded like this was told to her by Chad. The discussion moved to Chad and Lori's missing children. At the time, only JJ was counted as missing, and the Rexburg PD had conducted raids on Melanie's apartment along with Al's. Melanie had been told by Chad and Lori that their children had been possessed and had become zombies. She shared concerns that she's been told Brandon needed to die, and that may indicate that the Tylee and JJ needed to die as well. She told me she was worried that Al may have had to take care of the kids. She explained that Al had great faith and never wavered in his trust in the Lord. No task would be too difficult or great for him. When I asked for clarification, she restated her concern verbatim. At this point, I became severely worried, but I told myself there's no way I just married into a situation so sinister. I spent the next 2 days trying to justify my actions and reassure myself that everything was fine, but I couldn't get to that point. My ex-wife Natalie had been asking for Melanie's name so she could check her out on social media and get an idea of who she is. Melanie had been adamant that I not share her full name with anyone for fear that Brandon may locate and harass her. I couldn't justify that and eventually gave Natalie Melanie's full name. On Tuesday, December 2nd, I got a call from my mother. She'd just gotten off the phone with Natalie. When we divorced, Natalie made a point to cut herself off from my entire family and hadn't spoken to any of them for at least 8 months. She had made as little contact with me as possible, but hadn't been unkind since the initial conflict of the divorce. My mother told me she just received a video call from Natalie. Natalie was terrified. She'd managed to reach Brandon through his business and heard his side of things. She had been told that Melanie was in a cult and that she had tried to have him killed. While I didn't and still don't believe she had anything to do with his attempted murder, I was still terrified at the possibility. The next morning on the way to work, Natalie called and we were discussing how to handle things in order to keep our kids safe. She told me she was going to meet with the police. I told her I'd go along and lay out everything I understand. I saw 2 possibilities. The first was that Melanie isn't who I thought she was, and I keep myself and my family out of a dangerous situation. The second was that Melanie had been taken advantage of, and I'm going to get her out of a messy situation and healed. When meeting with the police, I intended to share things as I understood. Detectives Hope and Hermosa were present along with an FBI agent named Ricky. I've since shared all my concerns with Melanie and have gotten clarification on some of them. What I shared with the police were the ideas that Chad, Lori, and Alex may have planned shooting at Brandon and that Tylee and JJ may be in serious danger if Melanie's fears have any validity. If shooting at Brandon was indeed based on the idea that he was no longer actually Brandon and needed to die as part of the Lord's plan, then the kids' lives could be forfeit based on that idea that they're not really Tylee and JJ anymore. I shared that Melanie had concerns about them participating in the shooting and was against anyone trying to hurt him. She couldn't see them doing these things, but she also knew they would follow the Lord's will as they saw it. I shared ideas about earthquakes being prepared in SLC, and that it was believed that there would be a time when the quakes hit that many possessions would occur there due to the high number of injured there would be. Such a thing would be a huge threat to God's plan and would need to be dealt with directly. Al and Zulema had stayed in Las Vegas and were preparing earthquakes at the time I spoke with police. I shared concerns for the safety of my kids and Natalie. I offered to help in any way I can. I then allowed them to pull data from my phone. So a couple things I want to address about this. First of all, In this document, Ian says that it was his ex-wife who had found Brandon in order to ask him about Melanie. But in the interviews, Ian and Melanie both say that it was Brandon who went out of his way to track down Ian's wife and fill her head with lies. So, I mean, depending on which way you look at it, they're very different activities. Additionally, now they're saying that earthquakes are going to be a problem, right? Because if earthquakes happen, then there's going to be a lot of injured people, giving the dark spirits a lot more potential to invade the earth and throw off the balance. So Alex and Zulema were in Vegas preparing earthquakes. I met with them again the following afternoon and restated what I knew for a few other detectives, Lieutenant Ball and another FBI agent named Travis. They shared some mild concern about me potentially spying for Chad and Lori. I explained that I was there because I was concerned primarily for the safety of my kids and that I wanted to get Melanie out of this if possible. They gave me a recording device that looked like a thumb drive on a keychain. My plan was to record anything I thought could help locate Tylee and JJ, locate Chad and Lori, and understand what happened when Brandon was shot at. If I thought Chad and Lori were going to be calling, I'd turn on the recorder and just let it run until they'd hung up. I don't feel that anything substantial was recorded, as Chad and Lori never talked about the kids or their location. Most of the conversations consisted of everyone commiserating about the current circumstances, discussing religious ideas, and just catching up. In addition to the recordings, I would talk with Ricky, and he'd let me know about things that may come up in conversation. He was never specific, but would give me enough information for me to know when it came up. These tips turned into Tammy's body being exhumed and Al's passing. Okay, so here's where Ian claims he came clean with Melanie. It says, on 12/19, Detective Hermosa contacted me and told me they had another warrant for Al's apartment next door. He asked if I'd give them the code to the garage so they would not have to break the door in. I shared the code. I didn't see any reason not to. They went in with a forensics team and looked for any evidence of JJ having been there. Melanie saw them there and spent the afternoon at my apartment. That night, I went to the apartment and looked around to see what they had been doing or if they'd taken anything. I also wanted to see the warrants to understand what they'd been looking for. After looking around, I went to see Melanie at my apartment. I finally broke down and told her that I'd spoken with the police, that I don't believe any of this. I didn't know how she would react, but I couldn't hang on to the stress anymore. Of course, she was hurt, feeling betrayed, but she reassured me that she loves me and that she understands why I did it. At that time, I didn't share that I'd been recording anything. I wasn't sure if we'd hear from Chad and Lori again. So then he says, as the week followed, and after she forgave him and everything was on the open, they began to discuss their situations, and he came to understand things a little better. He says she was legitimately afraid of the ideas I'd shared with the police and FBI, but they weren't anything she had any proof of. As I've spoken with her and dug into the details, I've come to believe that she truly doesn't know anything about who shot at Brandon or where the kids have gone. She only has what-if scenarios that she's shared, and I'm worried that I jumped the gun and have sent the authorities on yet another wild goose chase, along with prompting them to light up the national media with pieces of what I shared. My intent was to protect my family and help solve the case of the kids' disappearance, not smear anyone in the public eye. I certainly didn't want to give Brandon any ammo to hurt Melanie any more than he already has. I still have my doubts, he says. Primarily, why not turn to the police first instead of disappearing if you claim your life is in danger? Why leave your innocent niece here to clean up the mess and encourage her not to cooperate with the authorities? Why encourage her not to fight for her kids? Her ex-husband now has temporary sole custody as a result. Why not simply provide proof that the kids are okay and put an end to this insanity? Isn't it odd that the two detectives assigned to your case happen to be two of the Kane's Dark 50? Everyone trying to do their job and save these kids are either evil or deceived. Your kids are missing, and it doesn't come up once during a handful of lengthy conversations. There are so many more that I have. I don't ever want to have anything to do with those two after this. Melanie has been put through the ringer because of her paranoia or their paranoia, and now is in the hot seat because I went to the police and tried to help. I know she's done nothing wrong, and I want her free from this. So it's an interesting document, and at first I didn't know why he'd even written it. I thought he just wrote it for his own benefit, but it turns out, according to Ian, he wrote this so that he could send it to Melanie's lawyers so they knew exactly what had happened and what had gone on. Melanie told Ian that Chad and Lori had told her that JJ and Tylee had been possessed and were now zombies. She shared concerns that she's been told Brandon needed to die, and that may indicate that Tylee and JJ may need to die too. She told Ian she was worried that Al may have had to take care of the kids. She explained that Al had great faith and never wavered in his trust of the Lord. No task would be too great or too difficult for him. So I do feel like this would be too long for me to continue and do the interview with Ian and Melanie, so I'll just do that in a separate video and I'll just post it right after this one. It'll be easier to record and edit, and also easier and faster to upload if it's not a like over 2 hour long video, which I feel like it would be with those interviews included. But I do have plenty to say about those interviews. I do have plenty to say about Ian and Melanie, and I have plenty to say about what they had to say in these interviews. These interviews were done in a 3-part series with the East Idaho News. They're very well done. The guy running it, his name is Nate Eaton, I believe, did a really good job kind of almost behaving as if he was on their side, but also, you know, asking the tough questions. So those are really good, and I'll link them in the video of the interview so you guys can watch them if you want, but I'll play clips of the interview in the video so that you know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about it. But for now, I am going to put an end to this video and then stop the camera, turn it back on, and then record the next one. Thank you so much for being here. Remember to check out Surfshark VPN in the description box. I feel like it's been 3 hours since we talked about the sponsor because I've been recording for so long, but I feel like having a VPN nowadays is kind of necessary if you use the internet a lot. And Surfshark VPN is the best option out there. So remember, if you're interested in getting 85% off of a 2-year plan with 3 free months thrown in, click the link in the description box and use code stephanieharlowe. Thank you guys so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful, and I'll see you very soon, like in 5 minutes when I turn the camera back on after I get a drink and more coffee. Bye.